I had just started working at Harper's Grocery, a family-owned supermarket that had been a staple in my town for decades. The store was old but charming, with wooden shelves and a small bakery that always smelled like fresh bread. I was hired as a night stalker, a quiet, solitary job that fit me just fine. The idea of spending my nights stacking cereal boxes and sweeping floors didn't sound bad at all. But from the moment I walked into Harper's, something felt off. The air always seemed heavier than it should have been, and the fluorescent lights buzzed too loudly. My co-workers joked about it being haunted. "Old Mrs. Harper never left," one of them said with a laugh, referring to the late founder who had passed away years ago. I laughed along, but the idea lingered. One Thursday night, I clocked in at 10 p.m. It was the same routine as always. Restock the aisles, clean up, and keep an eye out for shoplifters. Not that we ever had any at that hour. The store was always dead quiet at night, with only the occasional hum of the refrigerators or the faint whir of the air conditioning breaking the silence. Around midnight, I was in the snack aisle when I heard the faint squeak of wheels. It sounded like a shopping cart. I froze. No one was supposed to be here but me. "Hello?" I called out, but my voice sounded small and uncertain. No answer. I peeked around the corner, expecting to see a stray customer who had somehow slipped in. Instead, I saw an old rusted shopping cart sitting at the far end of the aisle. It was one of those carts we'd long since replaced, its metal frame warped and corroded. I hadn't seen one like it in the store before. I walked toward it cautiously, my footsteps echoing in the empty store. The cart was empty, but its wheels were wet, leaving faint streaks of water on the floor. That didn't make sense. It hadn't rained in days. I grabbed the handle to move it back to the front of the store, but the metal was ice cold, so cold it burned my skin. I let go immediately, my heart pounding. "Okay, weird," I muttered, stepping back. As I turned to leave, I heard it again, the squeak of the wheels. Slowly, I turned back around. The cart had moved. It was now positioned in the center of the aisle, as if it had been pushed. A chill ran down my spine. I was sure I hadn't touched it again, and there was no one else around. I grabbed my radio and called the manager, Mike, who was working late in the office upstairs. "Hey, Mike, did you come down here just now?" "Nope," he replied. "Why? Everything okay?" Yeah, it's fine," I lied. I didn't want to sound paranoid, but something about that cart was deeply unsettling. I decided to leave it where it was and moved on to restocking the dairy section. The eerie feeling stuck with me, though, like I was being watched. At 1 a.m., I was sweeping the floor near the bakery when I heard it again, the squeak of the cart. This time it was louder, more deliberate. I whipped around, and there it was. The cart was back, sitting at the end of the bakery aisle, but this time it wasn't empty. Inside was a single item, a child's stuffed bear, old and tattered, with one button eye missing. I stared at it, my stomach twisting into knots. The bear hadn't been there before, I was sure of it. I slowly approached the cart, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run the other way. The closer I got, the colder the air around me felt, like I'd walked into a freezer. My breath fogged in front of me as I reached for the bear. The second my hand touched it, a deafening crash echoed through the store. It sounded like shelves toppling over, cans hitting the floor, and glass shattering all at once. I spun around, heart racing, but everything was as it should have been. The aisles were untouched, the shelves perfectly intact. "Mike!" I shouted into the radio, my voice shaking. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" he replied, sounding annoyed. "The crash. It was loud. There's no way you didn't hear it." "Are you feeling okay?" Mike asked. "I haven't heard anything all night." I didn't bother answering. My hands were shaking as I placed the bear back in the cart and stepped away. As I did, I noticed something horrifying. Wet footprints leading away from the cart, small and barefoot like a child's. The footprints trailed off into the bread aisle, where they vanished entirely. I grabbed my radio again. "Mike, I need you down here, now." All right, I'm coming," he grumbled. While I waited, I kept my eyes on the cart, as if expecting it to move again. It didn't, but the sense of being watched grew stronger, more oppressive. When Mike finally arrived, he took one look at me and frowned. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I pointed to the cart, but it was gone. The aisle was empty. The bear, the footprints, everything had disappeared. "I swear it was here," I stammered. "There was a cart and a bear and—" Mike held up a hand. "Look, why don't you take the rest of the night off? You're clearly stressed." I didn't argue. I grabbed my things and left, the cold night air feeling almost warm compared to the store's icy atmosphere. The next morning, I couldn't shake the events of the night before. I decided to do some digging. After some asking around, I found an old newspaper article about Harper's Grocery. 30 years ago, a little girl had gone missing in the store. She'd been shopping with her parents when she wandered off. Her body was never found, but they discovered her stuffed bear in the freezer aisle, sitting in an old shopping cart. I quit the next day. I didn't need the job badly enough to stay in that place. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the faint squeak of shopping cart wheels outside my window, and I wonder if she's still looking for her bear.